Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and in this video I am going to attempt to rank the Victorian books that I have read. I've really enjoyed watching some videos through the month of October where people have ranked their Victorian novels. I've watched Petra Yu's videos and a number of other people, as well as there's been some top 10 videos coming out, and so I thought, well, why don't I give it a whirl and see? I'm not always great at ranking. I find it really hard. So I'm also going to do tiers. I'm going to, I am ranking these, but I'm also doing them within the star ranking I gave them, which I think is really helpful. So that's the plan for these videos. When I started to look into it, I realized that I've read 66 Victorian books, which is way more than I thought, and so this is gonna have to be a two-part video, otherwise it's gonna be very, very long. So yeah, a few things here. I am not including the short stories that I've read unless they are part of a collection, because I have read a lot of Victorian short stories, and so here's the caveat to that though. There are some short stories that have introduced me to authors that I want to read more from, and so one of those is The Ghost of Fountain Lane by C.L. Purkis. This was a story that she wrote in 1894, and she wrote a series of short stories about a female detective named Loveday Brooke, which I think is a great name, and I really enjoyed that story, and I would love to read more from C.L. Purkis. I'm not sure that she ever wrote any full-length novels, but if I can find more of her short stories, I do want to read more from her. I also want to read more from J.S. Le Fanu. I read The Murdered Cousin from 1851 and Narrative of a Ghost of a Hand, and I couldn't find the date on that. Both of those short stories made me think that I want to read more from this author. The Narrative of a Ghost of a Hand is actually, that's a great story to read at this time of year because it's a ghost, but the only thing that people can see of this ghost is a hand, and that is so creepy. And then finally, The Phantom Coach by Amelia B. Edwards. The Phantom Coach was a great story, again, kind of ghosty, good for this time of year, and I actually have a video from possibly last October or 2 Victobers ago where I read that short story in my video. I'll link it here if you want to watch it. So, the only short stories included in this ranking will be from collections that I have read. I am also including books that have been published outside the UK, so I know that those aren't technically Victorian, but they were written in the Victorian time period, so I'm including those. And I'm also including non-fiction that I have read that was written during the Victorian time period. So I'm going to start with 2 books, and they're at the bottom of my ranking, but only because I didn't know how else to rank them. And these were 2 books that I read when I was a kid, and I have no idea. I really don't know how I would rank them now. The first I want to mention is Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. I really don't remember anything at all about this book, and so that's why I just wanted to, I wanted to mention that I have read it, but I really don't remember anything about it, and I have no interest in rereading it in order to give it a better ranking. These 2 books that I'm mentioning are children's books that I read when I was a kid, and I just can't remember. And the other one is Heidi by Johanna Spyri. This one, however, is one that I would reread because I do have an interest in rereading this one, and I picked up this gorgeous edition not that long ago at an antique store. This was given to Mary with many happy returns of the day, September 14th, 1937, Love from the Workmans, which I think is fantastic, and it's got some great illustrations in it, so I'm really happy that I found this edition, and this is one that I would read again. Okay, so getting that out of the way, let's get into actual rankings here. Although again, some of these have been books that I read a very long time ago and I really can't remember very much. Some of them I'm interested in rereading and some of them I'm not, and I'll just let you know as we go along. As I was putting this list together, I started to notice the authors that I have read multiple books by. So I'm going to start with that before I get into this actual ranking. And I just think it's so fascinating to look at the books that I've read multiple books by, and I think that you will be surprised to learn who the author is that I have read the most from. If you want to take a guess, that would be really fun. Put it in the comment section down below, your guess of who I've read the most from of Victorian authors. Okay, so first up for authors that I've read the most, that I've read multiple books by is Charles Dickens. But you may be surprised to learn that I have only read 2 Charles Dickens. Isn't that amazing? I've seen multiple Charles Dickens adaptations, which has made me feel like I've read more of him than I have. And so this is something that I am going to need to fix post haste. Anthony Trollope, I've read 3. The Brontes, I've put them all together in one category, and I know that that's wrong, but I did. I've read 3 books by the Bronte sisters. I've read 3 books by Thomas Hardy. I've read 4 books by Elizabeth Gaskell, William Harrison Ainsworth, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I've read 5 books by Wilkie Collins and Oscar Wilde. I've read 7 books by George MacDonald. But we're going to talk more about that when I get to it. So, were you surprised to learn that it's George MacDonald that I read the most by? Isn't that so interesting? Okay, let's dive straight into this for real. I am going to start with my least favorite Victorian books, and in part 2, I am going to talk about the books that I ranked 4 and 5 stars, so my favorite Victorian books. So let's start with the bottom of the stack. Coming in at number 64, and I gave this book 1 star. I did not like it at all, and that is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I had to read this in high school and I hated it. I thought it was so depressing. I really did not like the bleak outlook at all. Now I have gone on to read a couple more Thomas Hardy, and so I am debating reading this one again. I might, but I might not. I just don't really like books that have such a bleak outlook on life, so I might reread this one, but I might not. But coming in as my least favorite Victorian book is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. All right, coming in at 63 is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I also had to read this in high school, and I also did not like this one at all. This one, though, I did give 2 stars to, and again, this is one that I also might reread. But again, it was bleak, and it was the tone and the outlook that I really didn't like about this book at all. Coming in at number 62 is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I wanted to like this book more than I did. It is a monster to get through, but again, it's the same reason. It's this bleak outlook on life, and I hated the ending. I did. I hated the ending. This one I also gave 2 stars to. Now, those are the only books that I've so far given 1 or 2 stars to. The rest of the books I've liked. So the rest of these books that I'm going to talk about in this video are 3-star books. I liked them. I didn't love them. Now, a lot of the books in this chunk are books that I read a long time ago, and so I feel like I need to give them a reread in order to give them maybe a more current or accurate rating, but this is where they stand right now. Coming in at number 61 is Notes on Nursing, What It Is and What It Is Not by Florence Nightingale. I don't have a copy of this book to hold up. I read it on my Kindle, so I'm going to put a picture here for you. It is exactly what it is. It's a book that Florence Nightingale wrote on nursing, and I did find it interesting, but it wasn't fabulous. It didn't blow me away. One thing I found interesting was how much focus she gave to cleanliness and fresh air. That was kind of her 2 big things. If you want to be a nurse, this is what nursing is about: cleaning and making sure your patients have fresh air. So, I mean, I think it's historically something very interesting to read because she has such a big place in history, but there you go. Coming in at number 60 is Letters from Egypt, A Journey on the Nile, 1849 to 1850 by Florence Nightingale. These are letters that she wrote home to family and friends while she was on a trip in Egypt. And they were interesting, but not fabulous. And I actually really enjoyed the illustrations in that book almost more than the letters. And then coming in at number 59 is The Chef at War by Alexis Soyer. This is a brief little book, but he kept track of what it was like to be a chef at the Crimean War, and I found that historically fascinating. But again, it was just an average read. So those were 3 nonfiction books that I've read that I enjoyed, but I didn't love, but they were historically very interesting. Coming in at number 58 is Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. I read this last year for Victober and I was bored. I just found it so boring, and that was really, really disappointing to me considering how much I liked Jane Eyre. I can't understand how the person who wrote Jane Eyre also wrote Shirley. Yeah, like I was just bored, and this isn't one that I intend to reread anytime soon. So this is pretty firmly set where it is in the rankings. Okay, coming in at number 57 is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I just didn't really like this book very much. I read it, I enjoyed it okay, but I just found it a little too saccharine for me. It was just a little too sweet. All right, coming in at number 56 is The Female Detective by Andrew Forrester. I read this last year. It's a collection of short stories about a pretty much unnamed female detective. I found that part fascinating. It was very unclear what exactly her job was. I'm pretty sure she actually worked for the police, which would never have happened in the time period when this was written, but the stories were interesting. I liked some, I didn't like others in this collection, which is why I gave it 3 stars and why it's sitting at number 56 on my list. Okay, coming in at number 55 is Detection by Gaslight, 14 Victorian detective stories by Douglas G. Greene. Again, I liked some and I didn't like others in this collection. So we have Arthur Conan Doyle, The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. That one was fantastic. Arthur Morrison, The Case of the Lost Foreigner. Catherine L. Purkis, The Ghost of Fountain Lane. I liked that one. Rudyard Kipling, The Return of Imre. I didn't really like that one. Heaton Hill, The Divination of the Zagary Capsules. Baroness Orczy, The York Mystery. I like Baroness Orczy. George R. Sims, The Haverstock Hill Murder. R. Austin Freeman, The Dead Hand. L.T. Mead and Robert Eustace, Mr. Bovy's Unexpected Will. Silas H. Hawking, A Perverted Genius. G.K. Chesterton, The Eye of Apollo. Robert W. Chambers, The Purple Emperor, and Jacques Futrelle, The Tragedy of the Life Raft, and then Ian H. Heron, The Story of Balebrow. So again, this was mixed feelings for me. I liked some and I didn't really like others. And then coming in at 53 is The Notting Hill Mystery by Charles Warren Adams. This one is actually a full-length mystery story, and so I did like it a little bit better than the collections. This was published between 1862 and 1863 as an 8-part serial in the magazine Once a Week. It's, according to the back of this from British Library Crime Classics, it's widely acknowledged as the first detective story. It's told by an insurance investigator, Ralph Henderson, who is building a case against a sinister baron who is suspected of murdering his wife. What I enjoyed was how this was formatted. It's presented in the form of diary entries, letters, chemical analysis reports, interviews with witnesses, and a crime scene map. So I thought that was really interesting. These next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These next 7 books are kind of all glumped together because I read them so long ago that I don't really know how to rank them, except for the fact that I liked them, but I don't remember if I liked any one in particular really more than the others. And these are books by George MacDonald. And so this is why I said earlier that George MacDonald is the one that I've read the most by. However, I've read them in this format. So Bethany House in the 80s, I believe it was the 80s, published these books that have been edited by Michael R. Phillips. So I've read George MacDonald, but not really, and I want to read George MacDonald in his own words myself, because I believe that Michael Phillips updated the language a bit and stuff. So I read all of these like 25 years ago, and I remember I liked them, but I don't remember, you know, a ton about them, and I want to read George MacDonald for himself. So I've read The Marquis' Secret, which was originally called The Marquis of Lossy from 1877. I've read The Shepherd's Castle, which was originally titled Donal Grant, originally published in 1883. The Lady's Confession, originally titled Paul Faber Surgeon from 1879. The Fisherman's Lady, originally published as Malcolm in 1875. And The Baron's Apprenticeship, originally published as There and Back in 1891. And The Highlander's Last Song, originally published as What's Mine's Mine in 1886. And so I remember really enjoying those. Many of them were set in Scotland, and so I do actually want to read George MacDonald himself. And so one I have on my shelves is Robert Falconer from 1868. And so I have this on my shelves to read so I can read some actual George MacDonald. Oh, and one more that I don't have a physical copy of is The Curate's Awakening, which is about Thomas Wingfold, who is a clergyman with a crisis of faith. And I actually read that one multiple times. I had to read it in school. And yeah, so that's the George MacDonald situation. Okay, coming in at number 45 is Thomas Hardy's Under the Greenwood Tree. I read this, I liked it. But I had watched the adaptation multiple times before, and I just liked the adaptation better. This is one that I would reread though, and of the few Thomas Hardys that I've read, this is the least bleak of all of them. Coming in at number 44 is The Sign of Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So you can see this is the least favorite of what I've read of his so far. That being said, I still enjoyed it. And this is the one where we first meet Miss Morstan, and she has these jewels, and Holmes, you know, uncovers the mystery of her father's disappearance and why he was sending her a jewel every year, etc., etc. So yeah. Okay, coming in at number 43 is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. I just recently picked up this edition because it also has Cousin Phyllis that I'm looking forward to reading. But this is the edition that I have, that I've been reading Cranford in, and I love that it's got illustrations. It's a fantastic edition. The problem with this book, and the reason why it's currently sitting at 3 stars, is that I didn't know what I was getting when I went into it. And I started to read and it felt like vignettes, and it felt slightly disjointed, and I was expecting something different. So now that I know what it is, I need to go back and read it again, and I think that it'll bump up on my on my rankings, but for right now it's sitting at number 43. Number 42 is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. This one is again one that I read years ago, but I did like it. It was a bit of a slog to get through. Certain parts I found a little bit slow, but I loved the fact that Becky Sharp, who is the main character, is an unlikable main character, and I was fascinated by that. I also really enjoyed the time period because it's a Victorian book, but it takes place earlier in time. I love that he calls it a novel without a hero. Yeah, so I remember enjoying it, and I want to read it. I want to read it again. Coming in at number 41 is Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. This is another one that I read years and years ago that I remember liking, but I would like to reread this one as well. And coming in at number 40 is Little Minister by J.M. Barrie. Look at this edition. Isn't this fantastic? It's got an inscription in the front, to Annie from the boys, Christmas 1916. I absolutely love this little edition that I have. And this is a story that is set in a Scottish weaving village, and I remember liking it, but it's been so long that I want to reread it, and I really do think that on a reread it'll bump up on my rankings. Okay, coming in at number 39, and this one is actually 3.5 stars, and I'm gonna end part 1 of my video here, is The Big Bow Mystery by Israel Zangwill. I just finished rereading this, so I've read this one twice now, and this is the first full-length locked room mystery, and it was really fun. It was funnier than I remembered, and I had to temper my expectations, of course, because I knew it was a locked room mystery. I went into it at the beginning expecting a certain type of mystery, forgetting that it was written in the Victorian time period. And so when I partway through the story, I reminded myself of that and tempered my expectations, and I enjoyed it so much more. So that's where we're going to end for now. These are my 1, 2, and 3 star reads on my rankings. And so part 2 is going to have the books that I have ranked 4 and 5 stars. And so I hope that you will come back for part 2. Let me know if you've read any of these books and where they would rank for you. If you think that I've ranked a book fairly low, do you think that I should do a reread of it? Let me know in the comments. I love to chat with you. It's been really fun looking back on the books that I've read and to discover that I've read more than I thought that I did, and that for the most part I've enjoyed all of the Victorian books that I've read, except for a notable few. So I will see you very soon in part 2.